Welcome to now. Okay, I am so sorry. Besties, welcome. Thank you for making it on time. I was having a bit of some technical difficulties, not me here talking to myself. So, welcome. Please let me know how my audio is working, my visuals, and we're ready to go. So, we are here to discuss Vic's book, From Prison to Principal. We started this book club on Patreon, and we were supposed to read a chapter at a time and then get together and discuss it. It didn't work out that way. I'm sorry. I actually am done with the book. Oh my gosh, hold on. I need to grab it really quick. I have all three of Vic's books that we will be going through. Hi there. Are we here? Can you guys just drop a comment below and let me know we're here, ready to go? Thank you, Nadia. Okay, tell me why I was literally talking to myself for a little bit. Okay, the books. Let's get into it. So it's here. It's on the screen. It's on all over my TikTok. It's all over Instagram. And let me start with a little bit of a backstory of how we ended up with this book. So I actually met Victor through my social media platforms a couple of years ago. He reached out to me because he was needing some help with marketing tactics for the club that he is a director for. It's kind of like a boys and girls club. Anyway, we connected, and long story short, we ended up, speaking of Vic, he better show up. I did text him, and he was supposed to join us. Last seen at 7:36 on WhatsApp, so hopefully he can join us at some point. Anyway, let's get right along. So I connected with Vic a couple of years ago. We ended up carrying out some projects through GRC with the club. He has been a great resource, and when I met him, he gave me his book. He actually gave me the Spanish version, which you can also find on Amazon. Se llama La Última Libertad Humana, The Last of the Human Freedoms. This is the first book that he wrote, and he wrote it as a short story for a writing contest. He put it on Amazon, and then he decided to go back and rewrite it with more in his quote-unquote meat on the bones in each chapter. And he gave me a signed copy, a couple of years ago. Because it's in Spanish, I really couldn't get into it. I have a hard time. My reading comprehension in Spanish is very low. And so I just have been tugging it around for a while, and I've always wanted to read it because I really admire Vic, and I knew some of his backstory. Recently, when I went to Ciudad Juarez, and I was there for the mural project, Vic reached out to me because he was actually born in Juarez and raised in El Paso. So he probably connected, or I'm about to call him. I hope he joins us soon. Anyway, he reached out to me, he texted me, and he sent me a couple pages of this book where he was describing Juarez. And, I posted them on my Patreon, and something about it resonated with me because I was in Juarez, reading about Juarez through his POV, right? And he mentioned to me that he has family that lives in a place where you can literally see the bridge where our mural went up a few weeks ago. And so those few pages that he sent me piqued my interest enough that I went on my phone. I didn't have the book on me, but I found a preview of it with, Vic, he joined us, he's here. I found a preview of it. Welcome, Vic. We're glad you made it. I was about to call you. I was about to panic. I was like, please, not him standing me up in front of everybody. Just kidding. So anyway, I went on Kindle, and I was able to download a preview of, I think, the first two or three chapters, and then it didn't let me download the rest. And those first 3 chapters got me hooked, and I needed the book. So then I ended up, coming home, and I got a hold of the Spanish version, but it wasn't hitting the same. So I hit up Vic, and he's like, I have the English version. And I picked it up, and that's when we kind of decided to jump into the book club, right? I thought this is a good story. It was when I decided to drop the deportation story series on my YouTube channel. And I thought, what a perfect first story to get into. So I knew Vic for a couple years, but I didn't know his story in this depth, right? So some of you that are here in the comment section have read. Now, the plan was that we would read to chapter 6 and then talk about it and read the rest. Most of us got so hooked on this book that we finished it. I finished the book. Everybody has started kind of reading at their own pace. And first, I want to check into the comment section and see where everybody is. I will say that we're probably going to have some spoiler alerts. So if you haven't read the entire book and you don't want to spoil it, I would advise you to watch this later. We'll go into it step by step. We won't jump too far ahead, but I want to start with the first chapters. So those of you that are here, page 66 by Wednesday. All right, mine is on chapter 7, page 66 is chapter 6. So the directive was to be by chapter 6, at least chapter 6 today. And so we'll talk about up to chapter 6, and then you can check out of the live if you want, if you don't want spoiler alerts. And here's my game plan for the series with this book. Is today we're going to go into it together. Vic's in the comment section. He can kind of answer some questions. Early next week, I'm going to be sitting down with Vic to do a sit-down interview with him that I will post on my YouTube channel. That will give you guys time to finish this book and then read the second one. And then at the end of next week, I want to bring him on to a YouTube live where I actually go and he's here with me, and then we can answer all of your questions about both books together. Okay. So, listening to chapter 6. Did somebody say they found the audio version of the book? I started earlier when I texted you, and I'm more than halfway already. Chapter 6. Okay, so let's at least talk about chapter 6, or up to chapter 6, okay? And Vic, feel free to kind of help me. I have FOMO, but I haven't started the book, because life, I just got my book, okay? So if you guys just got it, there will be some spoilers. For those of you that have read up to chapter 6, start dropping your questions in the comment section, and we can kind of play it by ear. Some of us are done with it. Some of you have started the second one. If you haven't ordered the second one yet, do it tonight so that you get it on time. Because by the time we sit down with Vic on a live where you guys can ask questions about both books, it will probably be towards the end of next week. So let's all get on the same page and make sure you order the Butterfly book as well. Chapter 9. My library has it in audio as well. Okay, finished Prison to Principal halfway through the Butterfly book, cannot put them down. Okay, so the first 3 chapters, I read them while I was on Juarez through the Kindle preview. And the first thing that I think really caught my attention was a couple pages that Vic sent me, kind of explaining Juarez through his POV. And I thought it was really interesting how, back in the day, he talked about how his mom used to cross Juarez back and forth pretty freely. Well, everybody used to kind of cross back and forth for work or just to go hang out and then come back. And how different that is nowadays. Like you can't get over. And if you do get over, you're probably going to end up staying over there because of how hard different immigration laws are. Were you able to get it in audio? I was not able to get it in audio, but there are some besties that dropped a comment that they were. Let me tell you where I started breaking down in this book, okay? Obviously, the part where he starts narrating, his childhood, some of the abuse that he went through with his stepfather and his sister. I related as a single mother because I have also been in situations with abusive partners with my children in tow. And not really going to get into those specifics, but you guys kind of already know some of it. So this book had a lot of triggers on me because I related to it in so many different ways. And then seeing it through his point of view as a child experiencing it, right? Seeing his mom date this man that came into their life and just completely fucked shit up and left them with lifelong trauma. And I particularly want to talk about how I feel like the system failed Vic in so many different points of his life, but starting with his childhood. The fact that the stepdad, he never got arrested for everything. You know what I mean? Like the CPS cases, he ended up going out the easy way, in my opinion. I don't know. That didn't sit with me well. The book is not an audio version yet. Okay, no audio version. So, guys, start dropping your questions from these early chapters into the comment section. Vic is here ready to answer anything that you guys may want further details on. Most of my questions come later on, when he starts doing hood ratchet with his friends and, you know, going to court and all of that. That's really where I want to start picking his brain. And some of it, I don't want to do too much because I do want to save some of it for when we actually do the sit down. Chapter 6. I read this last week, so I'm not entirely fresh on what each chapter had. Okay, so he gets jumped into the gang at chapter 4. You know, what I really was surprised with is how heavy the gang involvement was at such a young age for these kids. From, 13, 14, 15. Vic, remind us how old you were. I just want to say how it's amazing how he took us on the fact that anything porous is better than Mexico. Migrating from wealthy to USA was better than our horrible home in Mexico. Let me read that again. I just want to say it's amazing how he took us on the fact that anything is better than Mexico. Migrating from being wealthy to USA was better than our humble home in Mexico. The part where he talked about how they moved to like the hood in El Paso, but to them it was like a paradise, because in comparison to what they had in Mexico, it was the immigrant's dream, and how he talked about his mom being so proud, when they got into their trailer and, their own place. Vic, at what point would you say that your mom began to dabble in substances? The CPS broke me because to me that was the first fall of splitting siblings. I feel like the separation of the siblings was completely traumatic, and here's another way that I kind of related to it. So when I got deported, my kids were also separated. 3 of them went to my mom, and then 2 of them went to my sister. To this day, we are still trying to mend that disconnect, because when they went to live in 2 different homes, my oldest 3 ended up with this really tight-knit bond, and then my younger 2 have this really tight-knit bond. And that was years ago, you guys. I was deported 6 years ago, and it was only the first year that they spent apart, right? But there's still like a disconnect between the 3 and the 2 because of that separation for the year. I can't imagine like being for the time that they were separated. I just know at that age, like, you're so vulnerable, and the fact that he as the oldest sibling felt responsible, that he had failed them in protecting them from the abuse. He failed them in being able to keep them together. And so you kind of start to see where his childhood trauma starts to build. And these are the things that later mold him in the type of adult, that he molds into, from, the triggers, his need to like protect his pride, and like, he exerted it through violence to never ever want to feel that small again. Just jumped on so Victor is in the comment section. So he was 12 years old when he was initiated into the gang. That's younger than, like, my son is 13 right now, and that is so crazy to me. Victor, what is your relationship like with your siblings today? Well, wait. I have a lot of questions before we get there. I guess that's not too much of a spoiler. Do tell us where you're at with your siblings. From what I've taken, he has a pretty good relationship with his sister. And I was about 5 or 6 years old when my mom started using. She had me at 15, so she must have been 21 or 22. Wow. So that was even when you were in Mexico, then she struggled with substance abuse. Okay, while he's letting us know about his relationship with the siblings, we're going to go into... That covers chapter 1, 2, and 3 are kind of like the early childhood. In chapter 4, we get into the neighborhood gang, where he starts to detail. I really started to feel like this was almost like an episode. It was a, a modern day Romeo and Juliet, right? Is this the part? Do you get a girlfriend on chapter 4 yet? Where do we introduce the baby mama? And forgive me, what was her name again? Somewhere in here. So chapter 4 is the gang, the fights. You ended up suspended. He describes the initiation into BCL. And he doesn't introduce the girlfriend yet. So he gets jumped in chapter 4. Yeah, at the end of chapter 4, he's jumped into the gang. Vic, anything you want to share with us that's not in your book about your initiation into the gang? Would you say you had a choice in the initiation of the gangs? It doesn't really... The book says he didn't. They just kind of, caught him off guard. And they jumped him, and then he was in. And it's not like he was going to say he didn't want to. I think I understood that he was afraid to. So he never said, like, yeah, jump me in. And so they almost kind of did him a service by just doing it. It's almost like they ripped off the Band-Aid really quickly for him. A lot of people don't realize that growing up in the hood ages or matures you in a different point of view compared to the normal 13-year-old mindset. I completely agree. Yes. My son is 11, about to turn 12. He's a babe. Yeah. My son is 13, and I cannot imagine him in that environment. Okay. Chapter 5 is after he's been jumped into the gang. And this is where he introduces his girlfriend. I want to know how you two ended up dating, because she was from the rival gang. And you mentioned how you weren't allowed over at her house and stuff. So how did y'all end up hooking up? I was wondering, at what point did the gang decide that they wanted him? Like, who made that call? I didn't have a choice, but I wanted to be part of a family. So from what I read on the book, it sounds like once he took the beating, when he got jumped, before he got jumped by the gang, when they got jumped by the rival gang, I think it was on school grounds. And, he talks about how everybody was patting him on the back and, he was so great. And then I think that's when he said that the gang noticed him. So yeah, they made it easier for him to become a member, because he didn't have to take the step to say, I want to do it, right? Because who's gonna wanna volunteer his tribute to get beat up? And because I think he mentioned he had seen other people get initiated, right? Like, so he had seen what it took. He'd already taken some beatings. So no, I honestly probably wouldn't do it either. I would probably just wait till they pull you in without choice, or just, probably, I don't know. We're built different, Vic, because I could never. So by just kind of catching him off guard, they did him the favor of kind of giving him that push in. And once he was in, like, he talks about how he wanted something to belong to. He felt, he found that feeling of family and his place among, like, respect and pride, and like he was somebody at that small age of 12. It's crazy for me to think about that thought process through a 12-year-old, and what the circumstances had to have been at home for you to feel like that is the only place that you could have found it. However, I also relate to it, because I was also 12 years old when I started running away from home. And I did not end up in gangs, but I was also out in the streets looking for the same thing, a place of belonging, attention, love, the things that I was not being fulfilled with at home, because my mom was always out, working. So there was no parent in my household. And I'm telling you, like, as I read through this book, there were so many triggers for me that, although it wasn't a replica of his story, I had some of those same at that same age. Like, I was 12 years old the first time I ran away. I was 12 years old the first time I got arrested. And at the time, I used to think, like, it's because I'm a bad kid. I'm just a bad kid. But now I look back and I'm like, I was just a really hurt kid, you know? Sylvia said, are you his daughter? Do we get the honor? Oh, Sylvia's here too. Okay, so Sylvia is Victor's daughter. This is her book. So Victor's story is here and Sylvia's story is here. We will get into her story later because most of us have not purchased her book, but you're gonna want to add to cart immediately. New character unlocked. Crazy to think RJ is almost 12. I can't even imagine him being in that situation. Oh. I was sexually abused, so I always feel like a weirdo, so gangs was like a place of belonging. Oh, Maria, I'm so sorry. You guys, the way we are going to get so deep. Okay, chapter 5. Vic, we need to know how you ended up with your baby mama, how you guys clicked being from opposite gangs, and yeah, it's giving modern day Romeo and Juliet gang edition. You know what I mean? So Julia, or not Julia, not her name's not Sylvia. What was her name? Veronica, right? Veronica is her name. Also, Vic, did you have to get releases to use people's names? Because these are their real names, right? Asking for a friend, when you write a book, do you have to get consent to use their full name? Sylvia, we're gonna need you to come back when we go over your book. Yes, definitely. Okay, so chapter 5 is when Sylvia is conceived. Yo, this hits so different having them in the chat. Sylvia's conceived, and it's giving you need to add another chapter. 15 years old. He's 15 years old when she gets pregnant. Okay, Maya's 15. My daughter's 15 right now. I can't imagine. And continued with drugs. Teachers kept trying to help them, blah, blah, blah. So he was using drugs heavily throughout the majority of the pregnancy. And I kind of feel like you weren't very involved in the pregnancy. So you were 15, but her mom was older, right? Somewhere in this book, you also mentioned how you looked a little bit more mature for your age, so you clicked with the older girls. And then this chapter also begins to talk about spanking. Okay, you guys, this is where we're going to start getting into the good stuff. So spoiler alert, if you have not finished the book, hop off now and come back and watch it later because we're going to start getting into the nitty gritty. We've covered some of the, basic foundation, but this is where it just starts getting good. She was 17 and he was 15. Sylvia, can you maybe fill out the gap in for us since Vic is maybe taking a little while to reply? How did they end up from opposite gangs and, hanging out? And along came Sylvia. So she was 17, he was 15. So by the time you were born, she was 17? Or 18, which is around the time that I had my first baby too. That's kind of crazy. Okay, this chapter also covers the drive-by. Spoiler alert, hop off now if you haven't gotten to this part. So now that he's initiated into his gang, and he's very active in the gang. He's using drugs. He's getting high. He's going to kickbacks. Sylvia has been born. She's 3 months old. And it's the night of the drive-by. They met in school and class together. Okay. Sylvia, you've read this book a few times. And so really quick to sum up the drive-by is they did a drive-by. Look, when I tell you my jaw dropped, getting into this part of the story, he did a drive-by with his friends on his baby mama's house where his baby was living and sleeping. And no judgment here, right? No one to judge, but it was definitely my jaw dropped when I realized he took them to the house where his baby was. So Sylvia, now that you are an adult, at what point did you find out about this and how did you feel? Very, very slow writer, clearly big. It took you 20 minutes to write very slow writer. So I have a confession to make, Vic. Today when I was writing down the chapters in my story, there is a particular crime that I also committed that I've never spoken about, and it involves my family. And I had a moment where I was like, do I want to put this in my book? And I realized if Vic can put what he did, the drive-by on his baby, I can put this in my book. So a huge shout out to Vic for being so transparent in his book, because I think anybody that reads it, our first judgment is like, how could you? What were you thinking? Like that was your baby. That was your baby that you, and we know that he was intoxicated the night of the murder. And that mixed in with 15-year-old mentality, you don't think things ahead until later, so I don't believe he had any malice. We all know he didn't mean to hurt his baby, but it's still really shocking to read that part of the book once you put two and two together and you realize he took them there with the baby mama. So did your mom, Victor, no tienes con ansias? We need answers, Vic. Did it's healing for anyone to let the stuff they did? It was very heavy. Yeah, very, very transparent, because anybody reading that is just kind of like that kind of shocks your core a little bit. And so that just goes to show you how disconnected he was from real life, because I believe that we all have a natural human instinct to protect our young, right? And when that disconnect happens, right, that's when abuse happens. That's when, crimes against children happen. That's when this type of shit happens. And I really think that there has to be something really like disconnected to cancel out that human instinct to protect your child, or to think ahead for your child, or, to be like, oh, hold on, I'm not going to take you to do a drive-by on my babies, I think I was like 7 when I found out what happened. Originally, I was told he was in the first stealing chickens. Oh, bless your heart, Sylvia. Okay. See, I have always been very transparent with my kids, and I didn't always know if it was the right thing to do, okay? But I've always told my kids exactly what I did, because I was afraid that they would find out on the internet or somewhere else before I could tell them. But to go from stealing chickens to, I think definitely some different conversations should have been had. But why chickens? They couldn't have given you some, and I'm sorry, pardon my humor, I hope this doesn't offend you, but they couldn't have given you something else, like, hey, he robbed a bank, or, I don't know, he robbed a bank so you could be good for the rest of your, something, but why the chickens? Whose idea was the chickens? I need the baby mama to tap in. I need to know the backstory to the chickens. Drugs don't let you think straight, like he wrote in his book. He knew, but like he didn't get it. And that's that disconnect that I'm talking about, right? Whether it's substances, or sometimes we go through so much abuse ourselves that by the time we are put into the role of a parent, that connection isn't there anymore. Not Mercado Libre. I'm sorry, Mercado Libre. You're going to have to come back tomorrow. They have our volleyball knee pads. I'm sorry. I cannot. Not tonight. Let me recharge my phone. The chickens. Vic, did I know about the chicken story? Wait a minute. Are we all finding out about shit together? He said chickens. Sylvia, hold on. We need the Vic also needs the chicken story, because it's traumatizing. Finding out of nowhere was crazy. I laugh about it now. So how did you find out? I think I read in the other book that you overheard some conversations, but what was that like? And at what point did you realize that he had been, the driver, and partially responsible for what happened to your uncle? And also, Vic, what is your relationship? This should probably wait till later, but I've been really curious. How was your relationship with Veronica? Did she ever forgive you? Have you talked to her since? You know, we all think we have these crazy stories about our baby dads, and I don't know. Look, if I was Veronica, I would give you the medal for the worst baby dad at the time. You know what I mean? Like, out of all things, because baby dads do some really stupid shit all the time, but that must have been like a gut punch to her for many years, anytime your name was mentioned. Maria said Victor, aka Pochana. Not the nicknames. Look, we're trying to have serious conversations. Not tonight, besties. Leave that shit on TikTok, okay? We're not doing nicknames. We all just found out the chicken story together. The chicken gangsta. I mean, I can understand though, as a mother, I can't imagine what I would tell my kids. You know, imagine that is such a heavy burden to relay and to carry into, because the last thing you want to do, you know what? I can understand why she gave her the chicken story, because she didn't want to plant hate into her daughter's heart. I'm assuming, right? That's where I would be coming from as a mother. If I'm in the same position and my baby daddy went to prison for many years because he did some type of shit like this, the last thing I wouldn't know how to tell my kids, and I wouldn't want my kids to grow up with that anger of my dad's in prison because he did this to my family, you know? So the chicken story, you know, maybe that's all she had at the time. You know, that's all that's the best she could come up with the circumstances that she had, with the coping tools that she had. The chicken story, and it got her through 7 years. So we're now no contact. Oh, I overheard my uncles. I think it's kind of a blur now. My mom always let me speak with him and never pinned me against him until now that I'm older. Whenever we fight, she throws that in my face. The shooting, like what you're. I don't know how much is too much to ask. So if I ask anything that's like out of line, just feel free to be like, yeah, I don't want to answer that one. But I just have so many questions, but I don't want to be too intrusive. How did he convince her to let her daughter visit the first time? That's in this book. It's in this book. She does talk about the relationship with her dad, how she, you know, eventually went to see him. One thing I will say, I was very moved. Me crying and daddy issues as I was reading this book, and I don't want to jump too far ahead, but clearly we see that Sylvia and Vic have a strong bond and relationship. And I was really touched by the bond that you guys were able to build while he was in prison. Through letters and phone calls, I feel like your guys' bond was stronger than some parents that have full access to their kids every single day, you know? So yeah, I was crying and daddy issues through this book, because not my dad living like down the street and didn't give me like a third of, you know, the inspiration and motive and all the stuff that you talk about in this book. But we don't want to jump too far ahead. The no contact with your mom would be really difficult. I can't. I'm no contact with my dad, so roles are reversed. I just know it's a very painful place to be in. Yes, I'm sorry. Stick to Vic's book. Let me put this one to the side. It's hard, y'all. It's hard because I've read both and I just have so many questions. So the drive-by, right? Vic, back to you. You talk about when you found out who, man, this is book. When I found out who it was that passed away, out of all people, right? Out of all people, I was like, not him. Like, it couldn't have been anybody else. Anybody else. But why do I feel like a lot of those gang shootings that you hear about in the news, it's always somebody innocent that gets taken out, right? In this case, an innocent 15-year-old boy. In this case, somebody else, right? No, I won't spoil it. But I think those are the ones that hit different. That's like, out of all the people, like, I'm sure there was a lot of, you know, gang members running around the front yard that night. But it caught somebody that had nothing to do with it. I have custody of my baby brother, so whenever I tell her she needs to do better in order to see him, she always says, I never kept you away from your dad, and he killed my brother. Oh, Sylvia, okay, there's so many things wrong with what she said. Here's why. Because I am also someone that has, like, kept visits from, you know, the dad and stuff, because it's will harm them emotionally more than do them well. And perhaps she sees it as like you're punishing her, right? and she doesn't see it through your eyes that you're doing it to protect your brothers. I don't even know the situation, but I'm 100% assuming that you choose to keep those visits because your mom is not in a good place. But when you are, in your mind, when you are not doing, when you're living a certain type of life, you're on the defense. I lived it. I spent a lot of years in criminal mentality, criminal patterns, that when somebody would, I took it as a punishment, or she's doing this to me, or she's trying to hurt me, she's out to get me, instead of, their point of view was they were protecting something from my behavior, from my mentality, from my toxic patterns, from the bad habits that I had. That's why you shouldn't read ahead. That's why y'all should read faster. First of all, okay? That's why y'all should read faster. So getting past chapter 6. So in chapter 6, Sylvia's uncle, and also, so chapter 6, his baby mama's brother, 15-year-old brother, is hit by one of the bullets in the drive-by. And what I thought was very, I thought about this when I was reading the part about the drive-by, Vic, where you mentioned how Spanky was driving at first, and then he was so drunk that he ended up passing out, and then you decided to take the initiative to get up, get out, move him, and get in the driver's seat. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you would just if somebody else had gotten up to do that and gotten in the driver's seat, if you had just been one of the ones in the back seat, how that one decision may have changed the outcome of your case? Because I feel like your position inside the vehicle that night, being the driver, you were culprit number 1 was a person with, the finger on the trigger. Culprit number 2 was a person that drove, and also they were your guns. But do you ever, I don't know, I thought about that when I read it. Imagine if he hadn't been the one to get up and move Spinky out of the driver's seat. Or imagine if Spinky hadn't passed out. If he had just held on for a little bit longer and been the one to be driving and shooting the gun, how that would have changed the outcome for the other people inside the car. Then we get into juvie. And we're going to trial. I'm not going to get into all the details, but when I read the chapter where he was offered the plea deal, first of all, can we talk about the fact that he was tried as an adult at 16 years old? I guess Texas had some really crazy strict laws, and they were cracking down a lot on gang violence. 16 years old. The fact that he was tasked with making decisions as an adult, when they were, talking about the plea deal, and he couldn't think as an adult because he wasn't an adult, but you put him in a situation where he had to make decisions that were going to affect the rest of his life, like the plea deal. You know what I mean? That was wild to me. I spent time in juvie, a lot of time in juvie, and I actually met a lot of, well, not met, but knew of a lot of teens that were transferred over to the adult system. So in Utah, the DT center, they call the DT, was right across the street from the big house. And they're for certain crimes that were really heinous, they would also charge them as adults. But I don't know, 16 years, I don't know, the whole thing was, I just felt like they were really hard on him, and they didn't really give him the chance to rehabilitate, you know what I mean? Isn't the juvenile justice system, that's what it's for, to try to rehabilitate the teenagers before they hit adulthood, I don't feel like they really gave him that chance. Victor, if Spanky stayed driving, do you think you would have been the one to pull the trigger? Part of me wants to believe that him passing out was a twisted blessing in disguise. That's a good question. So initially, the plan was, he mentioned that, they were going to pull up and he was going to demand to see his baby and then, I don't know, maybe fight them. But you're right, maybe it would have been reversed. And if Spanky was driving, maybe in his, because it really seemed like in that time of his life, he was down for anything. He was going to do whatever he had to do to prove, that he was loyal and he was worthy to his gang, and he was down as fuck. And imagine Spanky pulling up driving, and then Vic, and then him telling Vic, okay, Vic would have done it, So maybe you're right. Maybe that was a twisted blessing because, spoiler alert, I Googled the case and the Spanky ended up getting 80 years. And when I Googled the case, his appeal came up and I just said that his appeal was denied, but Spanky ended up getting a long, long time. Also, can we talk about the snitches in the back? Okay. Can we talk about the sellouts in the back seat? One of them took a plea deal and he went home with just probation. How do we feel about that? Do we feel like the other boys in the back seat should have also done some hard time along with Vic? My husband was incarcerated at 15 years, charged as an adult for murder and served 26 years. He paroled 3 years ago in his home and thriving. Was that also in Texas, Jazzy? That's very similar to Vic. 26 years, paroled 3 years ago. I often wonder how the system could just throw a kid away. Like, that's what it feels like, right? When they are that young, and not to justify murder at any age or anything like that, but there was no intervention for these kids. For them to get to that age in those circumstances, the system had already failed them in many different points of their life for them to get to that position. There's the system, their parents. There were a lot of things that happened before he reached that point of his life. And again, not blaming, he still holds his responsibility, but 15, you're a child. Like, your brain isn't even fully developed for you to understand the severity of what you're doing. You know what I mean? Remember what all the parents say, no amigos don't like the snitch in the back, but he took his deal. Yeah. It's about money. It's only prison life. Yeah. Big and I were just talking about that the other day at the club. About how it's the system is set up for you to stay in the system. Very few of us make it out. If I was still in Utah, if I hadn't gotten deported, I would still be in the system. Wholeheartedly believe that. I'm not projecting what they did, but they were just kids as well, and I'm sure throughout a lot of time if they didn't testify. True. Also, yes, at 15 years old. But, however, Vic was also a kid, and I was always very impressed with. He was always loyal as fuck. Like, he would have taken that shit to the, you know what I mean? Vic never sold out, and he was 15 too. He was also under a lot of stress. He was also facing a long time in jail. However, I feel like that loyalty to his gang came from his childhood trauma, because to him, that was his family. That was where he had found this place of belonging. Vic didn't know that that the gang was also gonna discard him eventually. He didn't know they were gonna turn on him. He later, got the hard reality check that they weren't the ones showing up to court. They weren't the one putting money on his books. They just forgot about him. And that must have been a hit to the stomach after, believing that you had finally found your people. That was your family. That's who was going to have your back. You were willing to do whatever for them. You were willing to shoot up your baby's house in the name of your gang. And when it came down to it, they scattered like roaches. That's hard. That's more emotional damage. If he didn't have enough by then, imagine like the betrayal. And so these are all those things that are molding him into the adult that he, you know what I mean? He wasn't even an adult then, into the child. But those are the most vulnerable years. Teenage years until like your early 20s. All that shit is going to mold you. Hella trust issues. But it's why he was so loyal, I believe. And even through the book, from what I read, is he was always a very, very loyal to his gang. I'm assuming because they think they're old enough to commit to a gang so they can pay for their crime. Victor was betrayed and discarded by some money, and he remained loyal to the very end. Down to Thomas. Alright, let me not ruin Thomas, but Vic, did you fall asleep on us? Are you okay? We need to get you like the talk to text. We forget Vic spent 21 years in prison, so he may not be as tech savvy as most of us are. The trial when nobody from the gang showed up. How did you feel when your own members blamed everything out? Oh, he was mad as fuck. He talked about how the guy that testified against him, not only did he testify against him, he said things like he added more crema to the tacos. You know what I mean? Because that was his job. His freedom relied on Vic's conviction. I had an experience like that too. Like so many similarities in my story. Not to this degree, but I had people sell me out. I was just talking about this on TikTok. I had a lot of friends sell me out. Um, he said I needed to charge his phone. What the fuck does he got? A flip phone? Damn, big. I think he fell asleep. He's gonna come back tomorrow and watch the replay and see who's trolling him. Imagine going into. Did they even have cell phones when he went to prison? They probably still had the landlines with the cords, right? He didn't. He didn't even. Oh, here he is. I don't blame any of my gang friends. Shorty testified and lied about me. Sylvia's are filling for him. Imagine, Vic. Did they have? They didn't have flip phones. Did they have the Nokia, the brick phones at least? At the very least. Sylvia's a book on Kindle. Yeah, is this one on Kindle? My brother's friends sell him out. He's currently doing time. A lot of it happens a lot. It happens a lot. Sylvia, answer questions. Vic said, I'm passing the torch to Sylvia. Okay, so after the betrayal, he's convicted. 21, and we're gonna get into all of this. When I do the sit down interview. So it's kind of good that he's not answering too much, so it leaves some room for when we sit down and we really get into these details. So he is sentenced to 21 years. No, 35. Sorry, he's sentenced to 35 years, and the brick phones. You're the one who tried. Oh yeah, actually you're right. He mentions how Sylvia is the one that teaches him how to use the phone. Because, when I read the part about your deportation, that shit was so triggering to me because I can't imagine being released into a world that you don't even know how to use the phone. Did y'all even have TVs back then? Internet? Actually, I need to shut up because I don't think you're that much older than me, but the 21 years in prison, it's like you were so behind in technology that it literally was like being released into a new world. Now here's my question, Vic. Technically speaking, you said that your dad is a U.S. citizen. So if you wanted to reopen your case, couldn't you go back and claim your citizenship? And have you ever wanted to? Not the TVs. They probably did have TVs back then, huh? What year was it when 1990? Oh, they definitely had TVs because I was born. I'm sorry, Vic. He's not that old. I didn't say he's old. I'm just referring to the part where he was inside prison for 21 years. And so he probably didn't know, much about technology. Let me just stop. Let me just stop while I'm ahead. I'll catch the rest on the replay. No internet, but we did have TVs. Color at least? Or just the black and white? There was no internet back then? No, you're right, because the internet... AOL came around when I was 12. And the dial-up, I was 10, 11, or 12. I believe he became a citizen after my dad's deportation. So he is a citizen? Oh, his dad became a citizen after my dad's deportation. Not sure if it makes a difference. I'm not an attorney, but I don't think so. Maybe it does. It does. Was he not... So Victor's dad, was he not born in the U.S.? Because that does make a difference. 98, 99 was when the internet got popping. So I don't know why I understood that. Maybe I read too fast. His dad was born in the U.S. and so that gave Vic, citizenship. It was just a matter of his mom not doing the paperwork. I can imagine brick phones as contraband. How could they hide them bricks? Well, we need to know. How did y'all sneak in the bricks? Because I'm sure they did back then, now. Vic could really do a whole series on prison content. Prison stories. He wasn't. Oh, okay. So that does make a difference. So if he naturalized after Vic's deportation, it does, yeah, he doesn't have the access to, because the same shit happened to me. My mom naturalized a month after I turned 18. So otherwise it would have given me automatic citizenship. Oh, my dad became a citizen when I was a teen. So then it should have given you automatic citizenship, but they didn't do the paperwork. Have you ever talked to an attorney? Like I said, I'm not an immigration attorney, but I feel like if he was a citizen when you were underage, when I was picked up by ICE, they asked me that. That was one of the things they asked me. If my stepdad had adopted me, or how old was I when my mom naturalized, and that would have given me citizenship. I didn't qualify for either. But if your dad became a citizen when you were an underage, then yeah, it gave you automatic citizenship. I don't know how things work back then, and I don't know what the legalities are to it if your mom didn't do the paperwork. But if it was before you turned 18, that made you an automatic citizen. Even if he was a birth citizen, he wouldn't, because he had a child in immigration, he's no longer dependent. That doesn't matter. As long as let me take that back. Again, I'm not an attorney. Let me shut the fuck up. Vic, go talk to an attorney. Okay, first question. Have you talked to an attorney? Have you ever considered going back? And if you could, would you go back? That's what we want to know. I believe they would have had to apply for a passport for Vic and would have given him the citizenship. Not all of us turning into immigration attorneys in the comment section. His arrest may have played a part. I don't know. Operation Find Vic a Pro Bono Attorney begins now. If one of your parents is a citizen underage, you are a U.S. citizen. So what I was told is if your parent naturalizes when you are a minor, you automatically get citizenship. But I don't know what the process is, clearly. So I would my best advice, we need to find a real attorney. We need to ask a real attorney so we can figure this out for Vic. All right, so then we go to prison for 21 years. Isolation. Okay, we were talking, my dad naturalized when I was 16, and all I was given was a green card. I became a citizen after 5 years having the green card. Maybe immigration laws were different back then? Immigration laws say must not be married or have kids. Yeah, I just finished The Journey of a Butterfly. I'm still wiping tears. I truly love the book. Oh, Marie Cruz. We're going to get there soon. We'll be there next week. Next week, when we have all read both books, we can all cry together and fucking kumbaya. Okay, so isolation. Ash and I were just talking about this last night. She finished the book yesterday, and she was talking about 3 years in isolation, like how the fuck. Okay, well, we know how he survived because he read hella books and he got his law degree and shit in there. But can we just all collectively agree that isolation, like the hold, is a form of torture? Someone literally sawed their dick off in there. Like, did y'all read the part in the book where the next door neighbor lost his shit? He went bananas and he self-mutilated. Like, I don't know. Like, I just feel like that's torture. That's literal, like, and it's the worst type of torture. It's mental torture. I feel like that's worse than physical torture, in my opinion. I spent a lot of time in cells when I was in juvie, and there were times where I would be assigned like a cell by myself. Sometimes I would get roomies or bunk beds in the bigger cells, but I had a hard time, and I was only in there for hours at a time by myself. Sometimes with shift change, 2 to 3 hours at the most. I cannot imagine just being by yourself for years and years and years. And I know 3 years isn't years, but 3 years in isolation is probably like 30. It feels like 30. Isolation still affects me. I tend to be in my room all the time, not very social. When you're in the hole, they don't get no mail. It's just you and yourself only. Imagine how deafening that must be. You know what I mean? I don't know. But for him, he talks about how those 3 years in the hole is what pivoted everything for him. It's what changed his perspective. It's where he lost himself in the books. He started getting his education. And most importantly, he got away from the gangs, because Had that not happened to him, he probably would have ended up dead or catching a new case, catching the body at one point, because he was that close, right? So in a way, I can kind of agree that the isolation is what kind of saved him in a way. And then can we fucking talk about when he got released and they released him into the pod with the ops? That was a fucking setup. That was a fucking setup just so they could put him right back, because they looked at him as problematic to begin with. They didn't want to let him out. They said, fine, we'll let you out. Yeah, we'll let you out. To the fucking ops. What a fucking setup. And we didn't even talk about Daniel's murder. We gotta go back a few chapters. I forget what chapter that was. Daniel's murder. I felt like I was watching like a movie from, y'all seen Django? The Django movie is one of my favorite movies. But I felt like that was a scene in the movie Django. And the way that he just narrated, and he was so young. I think he mentioned, we were talking about this yesterday too, I think he was like 17 when he witnessed Daniel's murder. So he's 17 years old and he's not witnessed 2 murders. One of them he had an active role in. I have never witnessed anybody get murdered, but can we collectively agree that the type of trauma this person, and here's what I think, okay? As somebody that was put into the system at a very young age, the system only exposed me to more shit, to more people, to more bad influences, to more crime. And that shit was traumatizing. And Vic talks about it, how he turned into an animal to be able to survive in those conditions. So you begin to adapt to your environment. When you're in juvie, the majority of your life, when you're in jail the majority of your life, you have to adapt to your environment and you have to turn into somebody that you're not. Sometimes it's to stay alive. And that's literally what happened to Vic. His story's a lot like my husband. Crazy, my husband was cuffed in the hallway and jumped by 2 other rivals. 25 years in the hole? No, 3 years in the hole. He spent 3 years in the hole. Wait. Oh, in Texas, placement in the hole can be indefinite. My friend Danny Crawl just got out of prison after 30 years. 25 years in the hole? That is so fucked. Indefinite? The hole forever? Like, that's just a setup for you to off yourself. I'm sorry, it is what it is. That's literally a setup. Like, we're gonna put you in here till you just off yourself. Because what else? What else is the purpose of that? Vic, did he end up deported? What is life like for him? And yeah, how did he survive? Very common in California for people to spend many years, decades in the hole. I just don't... Like, what is the... There is no benefit. Like, if anything, it's like you're cooking monsters in there. Because they're going bananas, right? You're cooking... Okay, so let me try to look at it from the point of view from the system. All right, we're going to throw him in the hole because he's so problematic and he's always getting in fights. He's done this. So we're going to make him spend the majority of his time in the hole, okay? At some point, like his friend, the sentence is going to expire unless they have life prisons. But okay, let's just talk about if they get out. What do you think these people who have spent 25 years in the hole, how do you think they're going to act when they get out into real life? It's like when you breed animals in captivity and then you release them in the wild. They fucking die because they don't know how to be among people, or even worse, they commit more crimes because they don't know how to be around. They don't know how to socialize. They don't know how to be humans anymore. There's a YouTube documentary about this issue in Texas, indefinite solitary confinement. We need to watch this. That's next on our list. They're quarantining you that you can't survive out here and go back. That they make money. That shit is sick. There was a huge lawsuit. The inmate population won't believe in 2015 that time in the hole is inhumane, and how are they a threat if they've been in the hole? It's like El Chapo's old self in the hole. I wonder if they put that in the hole for his latest murder. She needed a dark space. We'll make an exception for Yolanda Saldívar to be in the hole. No, really, that is That is really inhuman. I take that back. Okay, I feel like regardless of what people have done, even when we have personal, feelings about it, like the shit's inhumane as fuck. But one thing we've learned is that most people leave their humanity or their empathy at the door when it comes to any type of criminal. People believe that once you commit a crime, you don't have any rights anymore. We don't owe you shit. We can treat you like animals. We can throw you in the hole. We can throw you across the border because you committed a crime. So now we're entitled to do whatever the fuck we want with you. And that to me is broken. Vic, by any chance, did you go to Keys Academy? Petty prison life is one thing, but solitary confinement and definitely no way. Honestly, but here's the thing is we are wired to survive and to stay alive. So it's easy for me to say if I was sentenced to the hole for the rest of my life, I would just kill myself in there. I would pull a what's his name? Aaron Hernandez expeditiously, right? It's easy to say that because we haven't been there. But once you're in there, our minds and our bodies are wired for survival. So offing yourself is really, I don't think that simple. Even in the worst conditions of solitary confinement for many, 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 many years, it's like I said, it's mental torture because the only way out, imagine the only way out of there being death. It's like an unofficial death sentence. That's heavy. I feel like I was gonna go crazy in the hole and I only spent a week. Documentary is called The Box, spending 25 years in solitary confinement. It's about solitary in Texas. We need to watch that. That's next on our list. Okay, so after the 3 years in solitary confinement, then when he's released into the pod with the ops. He fights his way out, and that was like a perfect. That was not perfect, right? It sucked that he had to go through that, but that was gonna be his only way out. And then he turned into the jailhouse lawyer, and we were talking about this yesterday. How he put himself in a position where he became valuable to everybody, and not as a gang member. He became valuable through the education that he had acquired while he was in the hole. So he began overturning people's convictions. He began helping people with legal work. He began educating people on their rights inside the prison. And this is what made him valuable to the other members, but it's what made him an even bigger threat to the system, right? So yesterday we talked about it a little bit, and he mentioned how that was kind of his way out of the gang, because the only way out of the prison gang is by death, or if you turn into a Christian. I learned that yesterday. And he told me it's a case by case, because that's a lot of people try to take that way out, which is what I would have done. I would have been like, I'm a nun now. You can't touch me. But so because he turned into a jailhouse lawyer, the gangs kind of let him be. And that was the beginning of, I don't know Vic, how old were you by the time you got to this point? By the time you turned into, you spent your time in the hole, and the gang started kind of letting you do your thing as the new jailhouse lawyer. How old were you, and how many years did it take you to get to that point? Keys Academy in Socorro, Texas, alternative school. Daisy said I went there too. Not y'all finding classmates in here. My husband did 6 years and 30 days before being released. He was thrown in the hole. He was okay after 45 days in the hole because he did 2 months after that in immigration hole before deportation. I hated mediation, but boxing it out was cool. Victor's story gave me a cross between Blood and Blood and American Me. So I haven't seen either of those, but I did say that I felt like I was, if Blood In, Blood Out was a book, it would be this one. I need to watch that movie. I was 25 or 26. Oh, you were still pretty young then. Well, no, I take that back. Considering you went in there at 16, 10 years? All right, those were a rough first 10 years. So from 10 years, so it was like your halfway mark, no? Like at your halfway mark is when you start to transition into, you turned to a jailhouse lawyer, you started reading, you got educated, you got your law degree. And so you spent 10 years doing legal work from inside the prison walls. Let's talk about Thomas, okay? Spoiler alert. So Thomas ends up being the ungrateful ass cellie that Vic got his conviction overturned. He got his freedom through the education that Victor acquired in the hole. Okay, and so again, spoiler alert, but when I was reading this book, I had met Vic and Thomas from the club a couple of years ago. So when I tell you, like, my heart was rooting for Thomas to be Thomas. For a moment, I really thought, holy shit, it's the Thomas. Thomas got out of prison thanks to Vic, and then he came out here and he helped Vic make this club, and what a happy ending. You know, I really thought that's what it was going to be. And it ended up still kind of being that, but not being that, you know what I mean? So, yeah, fuck Thomas. Fuck white Thomas. Well, fuck Thomas number one. No, I'm just kidding, but I'm mad at him. The fact that he never... How long would he have been in there had you not helped him big? F. Thomas too. He's another Yolanda. He's another Yolanda to the whole expedition. Like, one of my questions: how did you get out without blood out? Because he turned into the jailhouse lawyer. We talked about this yesterday. He said that the gangs kind of left him be because he was valuable and he was pretty much everyone's attorney, if I understood correctly. And that would have been his only way out. Tommy. Who's Tommy? So, yeah, we want to know how long would Thomas have done in there? And when I got to the end of the book, you know, the last chapter, where it's the Thomas chapter, and I started reading, and that was when, like, my heart started beating fast, and I was like, oh my God, it's Thomas. And I was like, what a crazy story. And I had to read ahead to make sure I wasn't. And then I realized, oh, I'm wrong. It's not that Thomas. You need to watch those art classics. I know. I'm gonna do it soon. Because every time I tell people I haven't seen that movie, they say that my Mexican card is revoked. And that really hurts me. Okay, so then we're kind of getting towards the book where, okay, so he becomes part of the Cure, the Texas Cure. They, make a petition, an online petition, to get signatures so that the board will grant him parole. And I know I had nothing to do with it, but when I was reading his speech to the parole board, I felt proud of him. I felt so proud of him. And whereas Thomas today, Thomas would have served 7 years. That's still 7 years, you know, that's a long time. He probably should have served, no, let me shut up. Let me not be petty. But, you know, I think we've learned that when you do good things come back to you. Not always in the same form. And in this case, what you did for Thomas did eventually come back to you through a different Thomas. And that was like the perfect ending to your book, Vic. Perfect ending. And yeah, so although original Thomas wasn't grateful, it ended up coming full circle, you know, when he met Thomas. He was already an old man, 7 years as an attorney. Oh, he was an old white man. Maybe he passed away, Vic? Can we give him the benefit of the doubt? Maybe he went to jail again. A lot of things could have happened to him. But also the fact that he never followed up with you after he got out, even if it was just once or twice, or a letter, or money on your book, something. Yeah, so maybe something happened to Thomas. Let's just assume. You know. Anyway. So then he's released, and then we get to the deportation part of it. So when did you realize that you were being deported? Because if I read this correctly, you thought you were going home for some time, right? Can we talk about the phone call that he got when his sister told him he had been granted parole? Did anybody else cry like a little baby? I cried. I reread that part of that page where he explains, you know, getting the phone call from his sister and the way that he broke down. Like, I reread that page probably a good 5-6 times, and I cried each time for a minute. Like, where was I? I don't remember I was at the club. So look, I read this book. The last 2 like sittings that I read it, I was inside Club Vallarta while the kids were practicing soccer. And can I just tell you that it hit really different reading the book while I was in, because I feel like I was in Vic's world. Not only was I in Vic's world in the book, but I was at the club that he references in the book. So I don't know, it was a really eerie feeling to like be sitting on the bleachers in his world. In his world. You know what I mean? You think I can find an obituary for Prison Thomas? Vic, we need you to tell us, Tom. Did he tell us his full name? The FBI in us is gonna find Thomas, Vic, and we're gonna find what happened to him. Did he share his last name? Yes or no? A ver. Vic did. A ver. I don't think he shared his last name. He was in his 60s. So yeah. Imagine being 60 years old in prison. That's a long... Yeah, that's probably serving 12 years. I couldn't cry because I was in urgent care, but I held my tears back. Oh, I cried. And I didn't just cry. It really did take me a few days to recover from this book because it was so triggering. Why do you think I made all those TikToks crying? Like, I had a hard time, like, reeling back in, like, coming back to real life. Did we get... Yeah, I don't see a last name. It's just Prison Thomas. Me looking for a last name. Sylvia, do you have the last name? We have Thomas Mueller. That's not the Thomas we need. We need Prison Thomas. Did he ever answer about getting approval to release real people's name? No, he didn't. Vic or Sylvia, if you're still here, did you have to get some type of clearance to use people's real name? Asking for a friend, because when I write my book, am I gonna need to change? Because I know I won't get clearance from a lot of people that I'm gonna write about in my book. And we made it. All right, so that was actually perfect timing. We're a little bit over an hour. I can't remember. Okay, Sylvia, here's your homework. We need you to find Prison Thomas's last name. We want to find out what happened to him. We need answers for Prison Thomas. We just want to have a chat with him. Just kidding. No, we're not going to reach out to him. We were just curious. We want to know what happened to him. I think it was Thomas Burns or Thomas Burrell. Ash, you getting this? Screenshot, please. Screenshot added to the folder. Vic is really taking 3 to 5 business days to give us a date. This is why we need to sit him down. Yeah. Vic, we appreciate you joining us, but you're not typing fast enough for us, okay? I don't think he had to get clearance because he didn't get it from me. But you know why? Because Vic probably had this, oh, I love this for me. Probably had the same mentality. Well, I'm in Mexico. What are you going to do? Sue him in Mexico? What are you going to do? Sue a, but anyway, Sylvia, sue him for damages. I watched a movie one time. I don't remember what the name of the movie was, but there was this lady that was trying to write her book. She had her book all done, and she had to get a signature from her ex-husband so she could publish it because he was named in the book, and he wouldn't give it to her. And then she was screwed, and she couldn't publish it. Screenshot file for research purposes only. He's not used to technology. Yeah. Okay, so the next step is I am going to sit down with him next week. We scheduled a time where I will sit down and do just a one-on-one interview with him where we cover more details. I need you guys to go to my Patreon and drop all the questions. Well, I'll do a separate post, but I want you guys to drop all the questions that you guys want me to ask him during our sit down, or just the topics that you want more details on. And then after that, we're gonna drag him back to YouTube. But we'll schedule a time where we're actually in the same room together and we can read the questions, because his Twitter fingers are not twittering fast enough for us. So we need faster tea. So the next book is going to be Journey of a Butterfly. Okay. Writing in Cars with Boys. That was it. That was a book where she wrote a book and her husband wouldn't give her the signature, so she couldn't publish it. We're going to go from Michelle to Michelle to be on the safe side. Immediately, yes. Okay, so these are your 2 books. This is your homework. Go purchase this one. Vic, if you're still in here, can you give us an update on how many books you've sold? I have been, it's been really fun to kind of watch his numbers go up. Thank you to all of you guys that have purchased this book. We've sold more copies of this one than this one, because obviously this is the second one. So, thanks for having us, Vic. Thanks for being here. It's probably late. It's probably way past your bedtime. Sylvia, it was a joy to have you as well. Everybody's just really in awe with both of your guys' stories. So it was definitely a vibe. Again, your homework, besties, is go purchase a butterfly book next. First of all, finish this one. Finish this one because we're going to get into all the nitty gritty next week. And then I finished Journey of a Butterfly in an hour. So this is it's a short story. It's a really easy read. And definitely, you know what? You just gave me an idea. We were going to do a giveaway for the subs anyway on TikTok. I'm going to get some signed copies that maybe we could do like a giveaway. That would be really neat. I'm sure he would be willing. So yes, huge thank you to Victor and Sylvia for putting us on these books, for encouraging us to pick up reading again. Who would have thought? Who would have thought we would have been reading together? I love this for us. We have entered our book club era. Shout out to Vic. Great reads. Go buy the second book. And he has definitely given me the motivation to sit down and write mine. The guide, like a stencil of kind of, how he organizes book. And definitely I'm gonna take advantage of having the resource and the access to him to pick his brain and just get some guidance for him as an author. So thank you to everybody for joining us. This live will be available for live replay for anybody that missed it. And keep an eye out next week. I do anticipate being able to drop his interview, and then we will schedule a time for a second live. Once everybody's done with both books, we can sit down and do a live with him together where, you guys can drop your questions just like we're doing right now, but we'll have him here so he can answer them on a whim and get some closure and just get some closure from this really fascinating story. So thank you everybody for joining us. The link to the books can be found on my Patreon. I will also link them in the comment box of this video or of this live. Also, we are working on dropping a new wish list for the club. So once you get to know the book, we didn't even discuss it, but Victor is now the director of Club Vallarta, which is a boys and girls club in one of the most vulnerable areas in Puerto Vallarta. That's where we're playing soccer right now with the kids. And you guys, most of you already kind of know the projects that we did a couple months ago, but we want to relaunch their wish list and just give some traffic to the club for potential donors, people that want to help with supplies. And yeah, so keep an eye out for that. I will have them put together shortly, probably by the time that we drop the interview. Vic, if you're still here, let us know how many books you have sold. I think he gave me he sent me an update earlier today. So as of his update earlier, he had sold 152 total sales between both books. So the From Prison to Principal has sold 122, and the Butterfly book, Journey of a Butterfly, has sold 30 copies. So all of you that purchased, the 122 that purchased this book, you need this one. This is his daughter's story. Now, this is how I knew. It took me a second to put this shit together, okay? This is how dumb I am. In his dedication of this book, he mentions his daughter, and something that stuck out to me when I read this is he said, I want to send hugs and greetings to my beautiful daughter, Sylvia, who has traveled a more difficult path than mine and continues to flourish. And when I read that, I was like, a more difficult path? Like, bro, you spent your whole life in prison. What could be more difficult than that? Right? And it was a quick thought, and I just, I went on about my life. For some reason, when he gave me this book, I thought it was going to be like a fiction book, and maybe he just used his daughter's name as inspo. I don't fucking know. I was dumb. Until we read the back. And let me give you a intro to what this book is, right? So the back says, Sylvia was 17 years old and pregnant when her boyfriend Robert was brutally murdered, along with her stepfather in a senseless gang-related hit. Yeah. And then I realized, hold on. I was not okay when I realized this book was about his daughter. I was already curious about what her point of view would be. What from the experience, she was born to teen parents with substance abuse issues, heavy ties to gang, violence. She was 3 years old when she experienced her first drive-by. Okay, let's just start there. And so when I realized this book was about her, first of all, then the intro to this book made sense when he talked about that she has walked a more difficult journey than his. Why? Because she's a complete victim to her circumstances from the moment she was born, from the moment she was conceived. She was conceived into a very dark world, very different than ours, and she has been a victim of her circumstances for many years, different times. There's a lot of loss from her uncle to her boyfriend, who is the father of her child, her baby daddy. Oh my God, this let me not get into this too much. I don't want to ruin it. So I just read what's on the back, okay? It's a short read. So if you read this book, you need to read this one too. This is kind of not the sequel, but it's Sylvia's point of view, her experience. She talks about, her relationship with her dad while he was in prison. She talks about, what her circumstances were with her parents when she was young, about finding out Vic was in prison, and ultimately the murder of the father of her child. So he has sold 155. So that's 3 more than this morning. It's so fun to kind of see the count go up. So this morning he told me 152. Now we're at 155. So go run, get your copies. We will meet back here next week. The fact she continues to push through. And that's why it's called The Journey of a Butterfly, because, she continues to flourish. So a huge shout out to Sylvia. I'm telling you, I have never been so inspired by somebody's book. I mean, and maybe it's different because I relate, but also because I know him. We know him, y'all. We know him. We've met him. We've worked with him. And so after reading his book, the last couple of years, all the projects the time that I have spent with Vic, everything just kind of hit different, right? I was able to put some things together, this is why he does this. First of all, this is why he does this for work. This is why he's so involved. Because I'll be honest, y'all, I like kids, okay? But I don't like kids like that to work with them all day, every day. You have to be a very special type of person to work with kids the way that he works with kids, okay? I'm a mother. I have 5 kids. I get overwhelmed with my 5 kids. But he's around kids all day, 24. And you know why? Because he was them. He was them when he was younger, and he didn't have the resources. He didn't have the support. He didn't have the tools. He didn't have the guidance. And had he had the right tools, if the system hadn't failed him in so many different areas, he probably would have been a badass lawyer, or his path would have been very different. So he is, changing the lives of a lot of children at the club, I'm sure. I think we all have experiences of, in our childhood with teachers that made a difference, that left an impact, or, he talks about it in his book. I have, experiences myself as a child, as, somebody that was in the system, staff members, counselors that really made a difference in my life into my adulthood. And so it's really neat to see the way that he turned his life around, and now he's doing that for other children. So that's a good place to stop, pause, and go buy the second book. We will meet here sometime next week. I'll give you guys a schedule of when we decide to sit down with Vic. And I'm excited to sit down with him and do the interview and be able to pick his brain. And yeah, that's all I got for today. Have a good evening. Thank you for joining us. Huge shout out to Vic, Sylvia,